Well, Rod, I think before every season, you have to go on a long vacation if we're going to open up week one like that.
Yeah.
What a way for the Niners to open up the season 30-7 in Pittsburgh over a Steelers team that a lot of people were thinking that was going to be much improved. And not that this is not to say that they aren't going to be, because I think they just played a team that was a little bit better than them and they got off to a bad start. But the 49ers, the way that they started this game, it kind of made me think about the preseason and just like, why do we even watch the preseason? Because it was pretty clear they didn't really want to show too much in the preseason. And, we were kind of like, they didn't play great. There's certain things that they could have done better, but it was so meaningless if we're just basing it off of how they opened the season. So good win, 30-7. What was like your main takeaway of this game?
Well, it was a pretty clean game. There's, my slant of watching games. I mean, there's plenty to nitpick, but it was really, really overall, it was a really professional performance. Ayuk was massive. He was really great. Christian McCaffrey is, one of the best backs in the league. Brock was, efficient and played the point guard beautifully. Debo looked good. I mean, it was just a real workmanlike performance. It was good. I mean, they were in control from the gate and never really, that last drive of the half, they got kind of loose. But other than that, again, like I say, I could, Burford with 3 penalties.
We'll nitpick a little bit down the line here, because I think
Yeah.
you're right. In a game like this, when you're up by so much, sometimes you're kind of looking for the negative because you're like, what am I missing? Is there something that I'm missing? And I think offensive line is what we talked about all preseason long, and I think that is probably the same concern. But you talked about Brock, and let's lead with Brock because he is the quarterback. He is, the most important person on the offense as the offense goes. I had a conversation with somebody on Twitter today, and they said that they didn't believe in Brock. And I was like, yeah, I can get that. He doesn't have to be as good as he was at the end of last season, but if he's comparable, I think he's going to be good. And then this person also said, well, it's not like they improved the offense a ton. And I said, well, what they do have now is Brock and CMC at the beginning of the year, which we did not have last year. And you have improved play from Ayuk. Debo is healthier. The announcers definitely made a big point about him and Shanahan kind of having that meeting where Shanahan told him, like, you really need to get better, not stay the same. But the main thing, and I'm watching this game, the main thing that is different is they have a quarterback who can improvise when needed. And that is the main difference to me about Brock and Jimmy. Because I think Jimmy would have had a pretty good game in this environment as well. It would have been a little bit of a different game, but there would have been moments where I also think that they would have had stunted drives because Jimmy would have had to dump quickly or just take sacks, where Brock was able to improvise. He did the one spin move to get out left and to throw back to Debo, I believe. And there were other moments where he was able to scramble and get yards. Now, he did take a blind sack, which I was a little worried about. He did not see TJ Watt coming. And then when there was the moment where he had the fumble and he was able to hold the fumble. So he had his moments as well where he was kind of having to scoot around. But I think that's the main difference is you can extend drives. You have CMC, and he's the ultimate Swiss Army knife. And B, you have a quarterback whose instinct is not to drop it off at the sign of danger because he believes that he can get around or get a couple extra seconds with his feet. And I think that is a pretty big change from this year from last year. And I just saw it like more pronounced. And I'm a decent Jimmy fan. I don't hate Jimmy at all. We could have used him on the 3rd and 1 where CMC got stopped on the dive. But that's the difference to me is they have an ability to extend plays that they wouldn't have had last year. But ultimately, that's my takeaway on the Brock stuff for today.
All fair points. Yeah.
Now, there's comparisons out there. Obviously, we already mentioned everyone likes to compare him to Montana because they're kind of built similarly. But again, just watching him play, you said it best, point guard, workmanlike. He reminds me of if we could dial back the freneticness a little bit of Jeff Garcia and still have Jeff being able to make big plays. Like, I think that's the perfect thing that we need out of Brock. To expect him to be Joe or Steve is too high. Like that is just, you're talking about the ultimate, that you're talking about top 10 quarterback of all time. But if you look at what Jeff Garcia did in the early 2000s for the Niners, Jeff himself didn't have a big arm. What Jeff had was a willingness to trust himself, not only to throw, but also to run. Now, there was a risk thing with Jeff where he was maybe a little bit too confident in himself sometimes. But I think if Brock kind of takes the good of Jeff and maybe pulls back on some of the things that where Jeff would just throw a pick for no reason, I think that's kind of what we need from Brock. And that's kind of what I saw today was sort of the best of Jeff Garcia without some of the things that would make you scratch your head about Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't really put the ball in harm's way, which was, something that he did a bit last season, which is good. I mean, if he doesn't do that and doesn't take sacks, I mean, he has shown the ability to get the ball to his playmakers. And I have questioned him, and I still have questions moving forward, but none of the questions that I have are going to be answered or even going to be asked, in the next couple years. Questions like what happens when he gets paid and what happens when he doesn't have an all-pro set of weapons and he's making 30, 40, 50 million dollars and the supporting which will mean that he is responsible for making plays and is going to have a bunch of replacement level dudes out there. Is he that dude? I don't know. But, again, that's something for way far into the future because this year he's straight. And with the moves that they made, which I hope we talk about at some point, with they made with the cap, they're straight for next year.
I actually wanted to talk about that right now when you just said that.
So, yeah. So for what he is being asked to do right now, I think 9 games, 10 games now, I think I'm pretty comfortable in saying that he can do what he's been asked to do.
So there was an article that Dave Lombardi wrote, it was either yesterday or this morning, about the restructuring of some deals to open up cap space for this year. Now, as I've said, I don't understand how any of this works because it just seems impossible. But the gist, and I can't read throughout all the technical mumbo jumbo without just getting bored. But from what I understand is they just up the guarantees and the money that they're willing to pay out now, and which opens up money for the future. And so it sounds like Armstead, Trent, and somebody else got some money reworked. Kittle, which gives them money to spend in this year's cap, they also did the Zane Gonzales thing where they came to an injury settlement. So his cap hit was like 250,000 versus a million or something like that. So why do you think that they wanted to open up this money for this season's cap? Like there's got to be a strategy here. They just didn't do it, they could have they could have adjusted cap stuff just to kind of make things a little bit more breathable, but 40 million under the cap, what do you think was the reason for that?
Well, I think, and that is, because now people are speculating on what they're going to do with all that money. I think the lead has been buried. The fact that they are 40 million over, that money can roll into next year, where
Yes.
they were $40 million over.
So they
for
could be
next year's
even
cap.
essentially
They
for
could
next
be
year.
even for next year, which was the big thing, alleviating the concern about next year's cap, which I think is what it is they they've evened up the books for next year. And so now we've got a legit 2-year window with this,
which is what we talked about last week.
Right. So I think that's what it is. I guess if something juicy makes itself available,
like
with
my
this
dream
cap
of
money,
trading for a right tackle.
Right. If something like that opens up, I'm sure it gives them the flex. They would, you got a bird in the hand beats two in the bush. So if you could fix right tackle this season and then worry about the 15 or $20 million that you're over next year,
right,
we'll jump off that bridge when we get to it. But that's what the next thing I would look at is right around the trade deadline, if any of these teams that are not going anywhere and they've got an expensive tackle that they might be willing to part with to just get cap relief, or a pick or two that the 49ers are, they have the most cap room of anybody in the league, so they're in the catbird seat and that's really, to me, unless knock on wood, injuries, that's really the only weakness I really see in this team, really, is in the offensive line. As we sit right now, we had a bit of a scare with Trent going down, because that, we talked about that during the offseason, that if he were to get hurt, no disrespect to Jalen Moore, but that would be a problem. We can't afford to lose him. And it was something I noticed. We were running the ball very well to the left. And that's where we're going to make hay, because, McKivitz and Burford, and to a lesser extent, Brindle, are still huge question marks over there from the center over to the right side. So if you could do anything, a guard or a tackle, because there was some talk around camp that Burford could possibly kick outside to tackle if needed. So if you could get any kind of solid lineman over there on the right hand side, even a guard, that maybe made that possible, I think we're still in a position where upgrading on that side of the line should be something that is a consideration, be it free agents. I mean, be a trade, be a free agency, or the draft, whatever. That is still a question mark on this team moving forward, I think.
Now, calling for McKivitz's replacement in week 1 is unfair.
Yeah, and he was playing against TJ Watt, which, I mean,
playing against TJ.
As Shelvin, pointed out during our little chat, that he's not the first person that TJ Watt has given the business. So
yes,
you have to take that with a grain of salt. But the counterpoint is, he was supposed to be, according to the fan base, he was supposed to be this huge upgrade pass protection wise over McKivitz, and that was supposed to offset the fact that he was a huge minus compared to McGlinchey in the run game, because there's no question about that. McGlinchey is a way better run blocker than McKivitz, but he struggled, and he probably would have struggled today too against. But I mean,
it would have been a bigger bullseye on his head than it was.
But I mean, Okay, but that's like 22 to 25 of the right tackles in the NFL probably would have struggled
Yeah.
today against TJ Watt. So while it wasn't a good performance, I'm gonna pump the brakes on, like you say, trying to replace him. We'll see. Um, we'll see. The next few weeks will tell the tale if that is really a huge cause for concern, or if this was just a blip and that he's going to have trouble against dudes that everybody in the league has trouble against.
I wish, and I don't know, maybe you can do this, but I would love to see like a super cut of every one of their battles, because on the sacks, he was just going right around him. And so what I was thinking is, oh, he must have been setting him up by going inside a lot, because the 2 sacks, and especially the one where Brock could have got killed, all he did was just went right around him. And it was almost like what else, what was McKivitz looking for him to do?
It
And I
had
wonder if
to
he was just setting him up inside a lot.
it had to be something like that, because like you say, on those ones where he went outside, it was like he really had no shot.
No.
And it wasn't like he was, it wasn't like Watt was getting pressure on every single snap. So it's just like you said, it seems like he was setting him up, and especially in those high leverage situations where, when they really needed to play, TJ was able to go outside and get what they needed. So like you say, it would be interesting to kind of just supercut McKivitz and see exactly, which we'll be able to do.
Yeah.
Once the all 22 is up. Which, since I haven't, I I don't really have any other games to watch this week. It doesn't seem like so. That'll be something that I can highlight and we can talk about next week for sure.
Yeah. All right. So we need to talk about some of these performances today, because there were some really good ones, especially offensively. Brandon Ayuk came out, and it was almost like he was inspired by Bosa getting his money and Debo getting his money last year. He just came out like a ball of fire. So he scores the first touchdown. And it was funny because it happened so quickly, and they scored so quickly that you didn't even really get to study the play. And then Patrick Peterson made a play like the next time the Niners had the ball. The announcers were praising Patrick Peterson. And then you go back to the touchdown, and you're like, oh, Ayuk juked this man out of his shoes before the score. And then you look at Patrick Peterson's stats. I think he had the one pass defense that we saw, and then he gave up 2 touchdowns. He had no tackles. And this is not a diss at Patrick Peterson. It is more so like the narrative of the game is sort of what the announcers want to talk about. And what I saw was I called him Ayuk was like ozone from breaking. Like he pop locked him and cut on him right, and then he went left and was like wide open for that easy score to open the game. But man, Ayuk just gets open because he was so wide open in this game. There was one play where there wasn't a guy like 2 yards around him circumference wise, and he was just wide open, and Brock just like, Brock didn't have to throw it hard, just threw a lob over there, and Ayuk's open. Just amazing performance today by Brandon.
And I'm not Patrick Peters' apologist, but there were a lot of people talking about how old he was and whatnot. But he played really well last year, and even to me on that second one, he was in pretty good position. Ayuk just, he made a great catch, to adjust to that ball, and he just played great. So for me, I'm always very leery. A boxing coach told me one time when my teammates were like talking crap about a dude that I just beat, he was like, pulled me to the side and said, "You're the last person on earth that should be down in this dude, because it doesn't do anything but just diminish your performance."
Yeah.
So you
didn't beat anybody.
I'm not gonna. Right. So I'm not gonna diminish Patrick Peterson. I'm here to big up BY in the all around great game he had. The stats I had on him, which again I stopped honestly to start setting up around 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, but I had him down for the 2 touchdowns. I had him for 6 first downs, and then the huge block to open up McCaffrey for the touchdown. him and Ray. So he just had an all around great game. And just kind of picked up where he left off in training camp. He was, I can't, with all the other guys we have, it's hard to say that one, because Debo is still a monster.
Yep.
So it's hard to say that he's our best receiver. If you want to give him the best route runner, I'll give you that. But I still, I'm one who still thinks that Debo is one of the best weapons all around in the NFL. So there's that. And if you just look at the way the play selection and play call goes, that Debo is still the X receiver in this offense. And in the Kyle Shanahan offense, that always has been Andre Johnson or Julio Jones. And that is Debo in this offense. And that's no disrespect to Ayuk. It's just, Debo he's that dude. But, Ayuk he'd probably be, if it wasn't for Debo, he clearly would be the X in this receiver and has all the talent in the world. So it's like we've got two of them, really. And it just, the way it sets up is it makes it so much easier for Brock to just, which I have to credit him for, is how calm he is to just kind of see what the defense is giving him and then just taking what they give him. And if they're going to let, Ayuk run open across the middle, there's no need to force it. Like most teams, you got to try to, if you watched any of the Vikings, I was kind of zooming around the way Cousins kind of forces the ball, and rightfully so, because Justin Jefferson is that dude. So if you're going to force it to somebody, force it to that guy. And that's what most teams do.
That's what Pickett was doing with Pickens. He's just every time he needed just to get rid of the ball, it's going to Pickens.
If you got a dog, that's what you do. That's for most part, that was Jerry Rice's career. If when in doubt, just get Jerry the ball, which makes perfect sense to me.
You trust that he's beating the guy,
right? Greatest receiver of all time. So yeah, that's fine, but it allows you to not have to force the ball to Christian or force the ball to Debo. Just take the open man, and that was what he did several times to Ayuk. And he's gonna win, and he's gonna catch it, and he's gonna make a play afterwards. So it's just what it speaks to is we have this embarrassment of riches, and you're gonna have somebody like George Kittle, who's one of the best weapons in the league, who's gonna be getting like 2 or 3 targets a game, which is it just speaks to the embarrassment of riches.
Yeah, and he'll have his opportunities down the line where they're going to need him Brock is going to need Kittle to make plays. An easy statistic for this game, which just shows kind of what we're talking about. Ayuk had 8 targets and 8 catches. So they're just
you can't. I mean, obviously, I'm stating the obvious, but you can't get any more efficient than that.
Yeah.
And that was, people were talking about the season that he could have, and it wasn't that I was ever down on him. My question was always with him was going to be volume. With any of these guys, really, when you started talking about overs and counting stats, is how the target distribution was going to go. And it was pretty even today. I had Kittle down for less than that, but he had 6 targets today, which is, if he could do that every game, he wasn't very efficient. He only caught half of them.
There was one that was a little bit of a fireball that he should have caught. And then I think that there was one that was a little off target.
It was just
I don't remember the third one though.
Yeah, I don't either. And I had him down for a drop on one and then Brock on a miss on the other one. But Ayuk caught all of his. Debo was 5 of 7.
It was Jennings, I think. I only remember one target for him.
And
CMC,
that was that one play that that one good play that
Peterson made.
But yeah, so Yeah, so that is, and it was always going to be a challenge. My thought process was always that you can, statistically you can always count for like 20% of the targets to go to the others. So in our case it'd be like Jennings and Dwelly and um Ray and
Nothing
dudes
but
like
juice.
that. Yeah, you can usually count on that. It's very rare that you get an equal distribution of 100% of the targets going to your, in this case, 4 top targets. But we damn near did that today. 26 of the 28 were distributed between those top 4 guys. So something that I didn't think would happen this week. I don't know if it probably ends up evening out over an entire season. But yeah, and then you look at somebody like McCaffrey, who I was questioning his rushing yard totals because I just didn't think he would get um enough um enough rushes to like challenge for the league. But I mean, if he's gonna go for 7 yards a carry, then he, because that, I figured that's right where you want him to be. If you can keep him between 20 and 25, that's right where you want him to be. But I was not, I'm gonna be the first to admit I didn't have 7 yards of carry on my bingo card. So yeah, that was very, very a
I mean,
very impressive performance.
even 20 carries now. He will probably miss a game or two this year. Running back is a very hard position on the body. But even at 20 carries, that's still 300 and over 300 carries in the season, plus all the other touches he gets passing the ball. I would imagine, unless it's a game, where maybe in this case, the 49ers wanted to run out the clock, so he got a little bit more. I would have liked to see a little bit more of Elijah Mitchell. And I wonder if some of that is Elijah Mitchell himself is dinged up, so you don't really know what you have there, so you kind of lean towards CMC because I in a tight game, in a divisional game, in a game against Seattle where you need to win, 25 carries for CMC, grind it out. In a game like this, when you're up by so much, I really would have liked them to pull it back a little bit because 20 is still pretty high on a running back who's had some issues with his wheels over the last few years.
And I'm full disclosure. One of my former alma maters is the University of Louisiana Lafayette, where shout out to ERAS own Elijah Mitchell. He went there. So I'm kind of an Elijah Mitchell apologist. So he didn't have much of a camp, but the fact is he wasn't very effective today. So so even if Kyle wanted to get him more touches, he didn't really do much with the touches he got. So
5 for 10.
Which makes it interesting to see that we didn't see JP at all.
No JP, and TDP was not on the active roster, and so we were talking about that in the preseason. Who was going to get the spot on to be on the active roster between JP and TDP? And for this week, at least, they had JP out there.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see. It was just a great all-around first win, especially as we kind of talked about in our preseason lead up to this game, especially considering the last 2 season openers have not been great in terms of coming out and handling our business early. We did that. And I mean, we were pretty much in control the entire way. Like I say, beyond that last drive of the second quarter where our coverage got inexplicably loose for some reason.
And they took advantage of the Niners pulling Bosa out, and then they just ran hurry up, so they couldn't even get the guy back on the field.
Right. I mean, and they seemed like they did. They clearly had him on a pitch count, and they did a really good job of keeping him where they needed him to be for somebody. And he didn't really do much, pressures or anything, but his presence was felt, and he didn't have any camp. So again, like I just said about Mitchell, we have high expectations with him, but he's only human. And I mean, this is his first football of this, of the summer/fall. So I think it was a good performance, and he seemed to come out unscathed, which was a concern that you, Shelvin, and I seem to have. Once he signed, was it he didn't tweak anything like Cam Hayward did with his groin, and as they mentioned in the broadcast, I mean, with big guys like that, you get an injury like that, it tends to linger, and it's hard, when you're moving the way those big dudes are moving, for that to ever kind of really heal unless you just shut it down. Because he tried to go back out there and give it a go, and it was clear quickly that that was just a non-starter. So it looks like we got, we came away unscathed on that front, which is just which is a win just all the way around.
Now, I noticed that we had some new downloads this week for folks listening to the podcast version on the BSPN network. So I wanted to just, for these new listeners, when Rod and I mentioned Shelvin is basically the third man on this show, even though he is not actually, you don't ever hear his voice, because Shelvin is somebody who's been in our, when I was on Facebook, in the Facebook group, he's in the Discord, super active. We got, Shelvin, you may hear the name Robert Ramos, who I've known since he was like 1 year old. You may hear Rick. Rick is the OG. So there's, a little bit of a vocabulary of who's who for this show. But just want folks to know who Shelvin was. Shelvin is,
he's like an executive producer almost.
Yeah, he's always checking in on us. He's always feeding us information. Like if we're doing this show and Shanahan's on the press conference, and he'll feed us information. So shout out to Shelvin, who is always there. Shelvin, Rick, Robert, all the OGs. Okay, so you mentioned previous opening weekends, and I didn't even tell you that I was doing this, but since the game was a little bit out of hand in the second half, I decided to go to Pro Football Reference and look at all of the opening games for the 49ers starting in 1981. I didn't go back any further than that, so that's still a very long time. And I was just wanting to look at what were some of the best week ones. And there's really no correlation with great season, if you win week one, because in the 80s, the Niners often played a tight week one, or they out and out lost. And we're talking about really good Niners teams. And so I have about 8 of them here, which I consider the best opening weekend games for the Niners. 1986, they beat the Bucs 31-7. So 86 is, they after winning in 84, they had a couple of soft years, and then they're back in 88 and 89. But in 86, they were still a really good football team. That was the year of the Chicago Bears, though. 1992, they beat the New York Giants 31-14. So that is post Montana. That is Steve Young's team. Montana's still on the roster, but I think he was hurt all season long. And Steve Young is the QB1 there. And this is the most memorable one to me. Like if someone had asked me, like, what's the biggest win the 49ers would have had on opening weekend, this is the one that would have come to mind. Jerry Rice breaking the touchdown record against the Raiders on Monday Night Football, 1994. That's the last time the 49ers won the Super Bowl. It has been quite a long time since then, but that is the one that I would have remembered. However, that is not the biggest victory to open the season. The biggest victory would have been the Dennis Erickson coached 2003. I mentioned Jeff Garcia earlier. They beat the Bears 49-7 opening weekend. I don't remember this game. And the reason why I don't remember it is because they would go on to be 7-9 that season. Harbaugh's first year, they beat the Seahawks 33-17. It's a pretty good win. Harbaugh's first ever coached 49ers game. And then you may remember this game, not a crazy offensive game, but the Niners would go on and beat Adrian Peterson's Minnesota Vikings 20-3. on the PM or the late night Monday Night Football game. First game coached by one Jim Tom Sula.
Oof.
And it gets worse. The next year, they roll the Rams 28-0. In a season, I think they only won like 2 games. Head coach Chip Kelly. And then in 2019, which would have been Shanahan's first week 1 victory, they beat the Bucs 31-17. So I was trying to find any sort of correlation to if winning big week 1 means much. It is a sort of a sign for success, but also it's not if we consider Jim Tom Sula and Chip Kelly being one and dones for their 49er career. So
I had successfully, until you mentioned him, deleted Dennis Erickson from my memory banks, and unfortunately cannot delete Tom Sula and Kelly from my memory banks. I really wish I could.
I was looking for some Nolan, some Mike Nolan stuff there, but I don't think they won an opening weekend with Mike Nolan.
for such a story franchise. We've had some rough stretches, but I think Kyle. I think he's now 1 under 500 in his opening days. I think he's now 3-4, which is moving to the right direction. He had some bad teams early, and it's just a good win. And now we've got our scuffling. Well, we don't know if it's scuffling, but no Cooper Kupp. The Rams just kind of seem in disarray, and when they're winning championships, we seem to have their number. So it's going to, but again, you can, the old cliche is, when you have rivalries like that, you can throw the records out the window. So, while we had a really good win this week, I would not, pencil. I just don't think in the NFL you can afford to just to pencil in any win.
Yeah, absolutely.
Against anybody, especially on the road against a division rival. So again, we just need to keep doing what we're doing and continue to be as efficient as we have been. And if those dudes are down, not do anything that gives them any life or any hope. Just put our foot on their throat and just go ahead and handle our business.
If we go back to the podcast that we listened to in the summer there, or earlier in the summer, the Playmakers, there is a little bit of big brother, little brother stuff with Shanahan and McVay. But if you're a Rams fan, you're like, yeah, you guys can win all the regular season matchups. We won when it counted to go to the actual big game. So that's what they will have. And, Brad Evans, who co-hosts Thompson to Clark with me, he's a huge Rams fan. So he and I go back on it. But, it's interesting because I feel like even though historically 49ers Rams has been the rival, I feel like our current fan base has more hatred for the Seahawks than we do for the Rams for whatever reason, probably because of, the Harbaugh and Pete stuff. So, I think the Niners just play the Rams well because Shanahan has a little bit of an edge. And so I go into this game thinking, and you say it's a road game, there's going to be more Niner fans there than Rams fans in that stadium.
That's the thing. That's the thing about LA. They still are, they were gone for like 12 years and they really still haven't. It's not just us. If you watch any Rams at all, you see that most weeks the opponent's team, with the Raiders, most weeks it's like they're playing road games. The opponents are outnumbering Rams fans, like 2-1. So it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic when you're trying to reestablish yourself in a market like they are. Which, I mean, it's been a while now. You would think that they won a championship, but that's such a fickle. That's such a fickle. If you're not the Dodgers or the Lakers, it's really, really tough. And most times it's been my experience that even the Dodgers and the Lakers losing is more of a story than any of those other
Yeah.
teams down there, with the possible exception of when USC is winning national natties. They might even be third
Yeah.
ahead of any of those other teams. It's just a weird market that way. So it's going to be, like you say, it probably will be a home game for the Niners.
So watching, this is the first time I've had Red Zone in a very long time. Like I was a DirecTV customer for a little while, but since I've been going Hulu Live, because I don't know if they had this last year. If they did, I didn't even realize, but they offer a Red Zone channel on Hulu Live
Just a la
TV
carte.
now. So I was able to add that. I mean, I had to take on some random ass other channels that I would never take, but but it's a channel that is on for 6 hours on Sunday, and now I'm paying for it until the football season's over. But it's kind of cool having it, like, because we're doing the show, and I got Red Zone on in the background, and I'm able to see that the Rams actually have a 7-3 lead over the Seahawks here. And Seahawks look like they're about to score, though. So yeah, it's kind of cool because Red Zone and all that was all DirecTV, but now with that whole thing being YouTube TV, and now the app, the NFL app, where you have the plus version of the app, you could also get Red Zone, and then, like you said, the all 22 stuff. So there's more ways to watch the NFL now, and I think there, what a cash cow. Like the NFL is like television. Like it's the most important thing on television. You could take your prestige television shows. I don't even know. I can't even. I don't even know what other normal television show draws a large amount of viewership outside of the NFL. Like even the NBA Finals, which does a really good number, it is still it's like half of what a Sunday night football game would do. So NFL is just king, and they're just doing so many things correctly with how. And I know Shelvin had to fork out some dough to watch the Niners on YouTube TV. He wasn't happy about the price, but hopefully the product and the experience it makes up for it a little bit.
Yeah, I am so happy that I am, at least in the short term, back here in the Bay Area. So it's not really a concern if I'm gonna be able to watch the Niners, because if you're out of market, it's really a crapshoot as to whether or not you're going to be able to get them. Now I know this season we have quite a few oh, Shelvin.
Shelvin said YouTube sucks. I can't figure out how to change the channel easily. No, but my dad's in the same boat because he's in Arizona too. So I don't know exactly how he watched it. I don't know if he forked over the cash for YouTube. I got to ask him. But so yeah, it's different. It's new. It's it probably allows them to draw a younger audience too, because I imagine the people who still have DirecTV are a very older demographic. So
I was having a conversation with somebody online talking about he was making this ridiculous argument about revenue and how ticket sales and all that, where clearly the NFL's revenue is driven by gambling and TV revenue. They could, I'm not saying they're not going to take our ticket and parking and hot dog money, but that's not what's driving the growth towards, the 25 million a year by 2027 that Raj is going for. But, for me, the next frontier, as they continue with their product and the growth and the way that you're able to consume it, and it gets more and more boutique in terms of being able to see different angles. And that's what I love about it, is at being at home, is that I can rewind and I can do my on-demand replays and whatnot. That is the next frontier in my mind. If they want to get me to spend the amount of money that it costs to go to a game, because I love, especially the road experience. I love going on road trips and seeing all the red and white jerseys in town, throughout the week, and just communing with fans and then going to the game. But the in-game product in the stadium just can't match watching it at home.
Yes.
So that's the next frontier. If they can get that dialed in where I can make where have seat back, like they do on the airplanes, where you have like monitors on the seat back and you can kind of curate the experience you're having watching the game in stadium. That's what would have to happen to me to go to more games. Hopefully we can.
The Apple headset, that's what they would love to do with that headset is, and here's how I've heard it. And so I'll use the UFC as a reference point here, or as an example. Like, let's say, you want to be front row at a UFC fight. So you would have that vantage point of the fight and of the fighters. And obviously, I'm sure you could sort of change it out, but you could get the angle that you want, or an NBA game where you want to sit courtside. You could have the angle that you want to watch it from, or the perspective in the camera of what you want to watch it from. The other thing that I think that, and Apple TV has done this for their baseball product, which is, I'm totally fine with Greg Olson and his play-by-play guy, Kevin. I forget Kevin's last name. They're a really fun team. Daryl Johnston, Mr. Dallas Cowboys, I'm not as happy with him. He's all right.
He's fine.
He's okay. In that instance, what I would like to do is I would like to dial up Greg Papa. Maybe if I could eliminate Tim Ryan. But I'd like to dial up Greg Papa and listen to him through my television. Now, on Apple TV's baseball thing, you could actually choose your radio feed. And so I can listen to John Miller and Dave Fleming while I'm watching the Apple baseball product on television. So that would be an added bonus. And if you are a YouTube TV person and you're already paying this enormous price tag, that would be a nice additive. That would be something that, maybe you could keep that to help keep customers and keep the churn down. Listen to Papa, listen to Ryan as you watch the television version of the product. I think that would be cool. Or, and this goes back to the Peyton Manning and Eli Manning and the Omaha stuff. Imagine if you could get some, a different version of a broadcast. So for us, we're talking about this matchup between TJ Watt and Colton McKivitz. You could have maybe folks who are more line focused. Maybe there's folks more defensive back focused as they're explaining how things are happening, in addition to just giving you sort of the normal play-by-play. Like, those are some angles that they could go with. But, that's kind of really niche kind of stuff where you're trying to keep consumers. But I would love the idea of that, because the Niners, if they are not the A1 game on Fox, we're gonna get some randos announcing these games who aren't great teams. And for our team, the Niners should be pretty good. I kind of want to hear the A team, most of the time. I want to hear, you want to hear the Al Michaels team. You want to hear the Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, because that makes it feel like these games are more important than the other games. And so I want these teams to be a little bit better.
Watch me careen this right off the rails. Or with AI, you could give me Joe Starkey and Gary Plummer, or Pat Summerall and John Madden. We can just have them AI the game with the old timers.
Oh yeah, you totally could. There's so much. I mean, think about how many actual words of John Madden saying something is out. Like, how many years did he do football? Since I think 81 may have been the first season that he did the NFL, and then he went all the way until like the early maybe the late 2000s. I think was so. There's so many words. Did you ever watch the Wilt Chamberlain documentary on Showtime? That they AI'd his voice in there, and it was fine. It was totally cool. I didn't feel like they were. I mean, his family signed off on it and everything, and I thought that was really cool. So yeah, you're totally right.
It's really scary, the things that they are able to do with that. Now, I had heard like this fake Joe Rogan podcast that really, if you hadn't told me, if you hadn't have told me that it wasn't Joe, I wouldn't have known. And that's really scary, where you can deep fake something like that for long stretches of long form content. That's really weird and pretty scary.
It is. It's very scary. I've taken some tutorials on AI stuff just because, for your work, they want us kind of not really train on it, but they just want us to have some ideas.
An awareness.
And I'm sort of anti because of the content creator aspect of it,
Mm-hmm.
because of why Hollywood doesn't want it and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm resistant to it, but we can only be resistant for so long because it's
Mm-hmm.
coming, and there's going to be some evil uses of it, and it's going to take, it's going to fake out a lot of really dumb people. It's
Exactly.
going to be the new misinformation. So
Mm-hmm.
all of the Trump lovers who were getting faked out, not smart people on that side who were voting for the side, but the real like dumb people who were like following all the stuff that he was saying that wasn't making any sort of sense. Those are the people who are going to get faked out
Who
like
don't
crazy.
vet any of the information that whatever is given to them, they just if it conforms to what it is their viewpoint is, they just run with it without any sort of maybe I should go to CNN or
Yeah.
Fox News or wherever. Maybe
Yeah.
I should try to vet this information somewhat, and see if this is really real.
Yeah,
But
it'll be weaponized for sure, and I think there will have to be, hopefully, your aunties and uncles who usually fall for that stuff. You can, maybe it's up to us to go like, hey, like don't be
don't do that.
don't be
Post that.
putting this
Yeah.
thing on Facebook. This is totally
Right.
fake. All
don't
right.
don't let that be you.
So the last thing I want to talk about, we didn't talk about the defense at all, and I think we should because I thought Fred Warner was awesome in this game. He had one play where he had a sure interception and he kind of juggled it, and I saw the jokes coming out about how all that juggling practice for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You can't catch that ball, but then he had a fantastic play where he tipped the ball in the air, and Hufanga intercepted it and made a nice return on that. So Fred Warner looked awesome. I thought Bosa, just for his gravity, like you explained all offseason long, his gravity made some openings for other players because none other than Drake Jackson,
2 sacks.
3 sacks.
3. He got a
had,
third one. Okay.
He got a third one. He had 3 sacks today. Drizzy, as I like to call him, he had 3 sacks. And even late in the game, Hargrave picked up his first sack as a 49er player. And then Kerry Hyder Jr. also had one. So they had 5 sacks in total. None of them were Bosa, but his gravity did change what they were doing. He got close a couple times, and he got held specifically one time. And then Shelvin and I, late in the game, he got close. He kind of got pushed, and then he took a blindside block after going down to a knee, and we were like, take this dude out. Shelvin and I both at the same time wrote it in our Discord. So, but yeah, I thought the defense, outside of that series where they were just in dime and Pittsburgh was running the 2-minute, there was a couple of plays where Demo was getting picked on a little bit. And I think he was also the one who had the penalty that allowed that Najee Harris run to get extra yards tacked onto it. So, if you want to, again, we talk about the nitpicking, some Demo, some Ambry Thomas, in that one series where they were getting picked on a bit, but otherwise, defensively, they played a super strong game.
I hadn't totaled it up. Look at Drizzy having himself a game. 3 tackles, 3 sacks, 3 quarterback hits, 2 tackles for loss. Man,
he looks big too.
That is a ball game right there. Go on, young fella.
Yeah, no, and think about that, right? Like, because we have him penciled in as a backup, and we don't, we're talking about, how good this defense will be if Kinlaw reaches, even close to his potential. If Drake Jackson, is all of a sudden coming in with fresh legs as a third defensive end and just being able to to pick up a sack here and there to help out that defense. It's just, you talk about the offensive weapons, but defensively as well. If they can if some of these guys are in positions, you don't need him. You don't need Drake to play to be the big playmaker on defense. You need him to come in and, have fresh legs and show off some of that youth and athleticism. And if he can, if he can make plays from that position, that's just money in the bank.
Well, that's the guy. He's one of those guys that you want if you're gonna be, because we saw it a little bit today. If you're gonna be double teaming Hargrave and you're gonna be double teaming Nick, that means you're gonna be single blocking dudes like Armstead and Drake, and that's what you do. You have those guys have to make them pay for trying to single block them, and Drake did that, and Armstead had a couple of really big plays. I know one kind of got blown back where he had, I think Farrell ended up getting the actual sack, but it was based on an opportunity that Armstead created with the quick pressure, and then Pickett moved up and Farrell cleaned him up. But if Armstead is one of those dudes, he's just so big that it's going to be hard for any one dude to single block him. But if you're not going to be able to single block Hargrave and you can't single block Nick, that's just, you can't. So these guys have to make teams pay for double teaming those dudes. And, Drake is off to a great start. I'm sure that is what they envision for someone of his size and athleticism to be able to do. That's one hell of a season start for him.
And we didn't see it a lot today because they didn't necessarily need it, but you were talking about Wilkes's blitz packages, and that is also going to disrupt a lot of these double teams, because if you can sort of figure out what the offense is going to try to do and you can bring pressure, and they're using two guys to block one, and then one guy just goes free, that's going to be great. Did you see anything about anything from Farrell?
Yeah, he had a couple of big plays. He had a tackle for loss, and he also had, how many? It was, I got it here. He had one pressure and one sack. So yeah, that was a good first game for him as well. These guys don't have to, it's not like we're counting on them to create tons of pressure, because we've got guys who we're counting on to make plays, but when they have opportunities, those dudes need to produce, kind of like Ebukam and Aminihu did last season. We don't need you to be a star. We just need you to contribute. And he did his job today, and Hyder got in there late. So those guys just need to really, they need to capitalize on some of the opportunities that our stars give them, and that they got high marks for that today.
5 sacks is a nice start. If you can get 5
with
sacks,
none from Bosa. So I mean, that's yeah.
If you can get 5 every game, you're doing some good stuff. All right, last thing before we get out of here. The biggest question mark, maybe in the offseason, was the mustachioed Jake Moody. Now, he didn't handle kickoffs today, which I'm assuming is probably more
health related.
Yeah, health related, and you don't want to test that quad. But his field goal kicks looked really good. He was also 3 of 3 on both field goals and PATs, and there was the first PAT. I think they had to walk back 5 yards, so that was more like a field goal. But yeah, he passed them now in a game where it's not super close. There's no pressure. I know Tomlin tried to ice him the first time, and it didn't work, so that's good. But yeah, there's going to be some pressure kicks for him that are coming, and he is still a rookie, and he's going to have some. Hopefully, we'll have some for failure. But past the first test, which is the opener, after a really shaky preseason, which we now wonder if the injury was kind of part of the issue for him. But can't wait to see him fully unleashed because, as much as I love money making Mitch, kicking it to the 2-yard line is not going to be great. Kickoff
and that's
coverage was not
one of
fantastic today.
And that was one of the benefits that you're going to sell me on. If you're going to sell me on Moody, is the fact that he's an instant touchback. So yeah, hopefully we can deploy that weapon sooner rather than later.
Yeah. All right, so we'll be back next week after they play the Rams. It's a late game, so we'll be up a little bit later. It's not a morning game, from what I understand. I think it's a 1:05 game. So we'll be back next week talking 49ers, Rams. I've been thinking I probably won't put these on YouTube, but I think there's an opportunity for me to do some solo podcasts, just more like short ones about, any sort of updates with the roster or injury reports or something, just kind of like a little midweek check-in that I might think about doing. I just want to test some stuff for the audio feed only. We'll save the YouTube and the podcast for these live stream post games, but there may be some other stuff coming into our podcast feed. So I may test some stuff at some point with the 49ers this season. So, all right. Thank you to Rod for hanging out. Thanks to Shelvin. Thanks to everybody who watched and listened to the podcast version. I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.